In the last video, we talked about how we can use these Boolean functions to help us actually interact with the program and have it start to make decisions for us or do things differently depending on what we actually input in. That's where we're heading with so far today. And it's going to start to look familiar to those of you who took Introduction to Computer Science or the Robotics class. This line of code, if you remember before, was at the top of our entire replit file. We took an X from the scanner, and we were wondering if we wanted to do something with it. And what I want to do today is write a program that depends differently, that behaves differently, if X is greater than 5. Yeah, that's it. Or if X is greater than or equal to 5, we'll go with that. And maybe what I want to do, if it's at least 5, I want to print out it's at least 5. Now, as my program stands right now, it's always going to print out it's at least 5, no matter what you do. But what we can add is a line of code called an if statement to check and see if a condition is true in order to determine whether we should print the statement out or not. The way that my program works right now is that if I run it and I actually type in 5, if I run it and I type in something that's at least 5, like say 7, it'll print it's at least 5. But if I run it and I give some value that's less, like 2, it's not going to do anything. The if statement allows you to check if a Boolean condition is true, to check if a statement is true, and if it is, print something out. For example, this Boolean check, right, is going to give us the result whether X is greater than or equal to 5. An if statement always expects a Boolean statement. An if statement always expects a Boolean statement in here. So one way to do that is to define a Boolean that's either going to be true or false. And if it is true, it'll conduct what's going on inside of the brackets. If it is true, it'll conduct what's going on inside of the brackets. Now, the way that we've done this in this example, don't you hate when you can't use computers the way you want to? The way that we've conducted this in this example is by putting a Boolean variable in here that already has a true or false value. But I actually like to get rid of my Boolean variable and just write the statement itself up here. What the if statement is expecting in between its parentheses is a statement that can yield a true or false result, that can yield a Boolean value, like X is greater than or equal to 5. And then it's going to print something out, showing that out. One quick thing to notice, we've got our brackets here. Whatever's inside of the brackets is our optional code. This is the option to do this thing whenever the condition is true. The most common mistake that I see is people putting a semicolon after their if statement, which will prevent it from working. If you put the semicolon after the if statement, it'll freak out because it'll think it's ending the if statement and it won't perform what's going on in the brackets. That is the most common error that I see when working with if statements. Now you're probably asking the question, hey, what if it's false? This is what's going to do if it's true. It's going to print out at least 5. But what if it's false? What if X is less than 4? If you remember from the Intro to Computer Science class, we have a counterpart called the else, which always goes right after my if statement and has its own set of brackets. And if this statement is not true, if whatever you've saved into X is, say, less than 5, it'll perform what's going on inside of this function. And I forgot a semicolon. How many of you saw that before and didn't say anything? I'm willing to bet quite a few of you. Now if I put in a number that's less than 5, it'll respond in kind with it's not at least 5. And this is the basic decision-making format that we can use for anything in our code. Remember that these if statements can have any sort of Boolean value in them and can have more than one. Before, we were evaluating these two Booleans to see if at least one was 8. Here's another recreation of that. Once I fix the quotes, here's an example of me using the or statement, which means I'm hoping that at least one of these is true. This can reduce itself to a true or false value. We had said before y was 10 and z was 5. And we've got two things that are going to be true or false statements and or in the middle. We can chain together more than one thing inside of our if statements, just like we do when we save it into a Boolean variable. And it'll perform this if it's true, and this if it's false. I know I gave you a lot of information in this lecture today. Feel free to pause things as you go through to make sure that you understand. Everything I talked about is annotated here. And there are 5 practice problems on the Booleans and if-else statements, notes, and IP assignment if you want to try it out. 3 ask you to try to write Boolean variables. So you'll start these out with like Boolean A equals something and translate the particular variable in here into words. Number 4 and 5 ask you to write simple if statements. 1 to write an if-else, 1 to write an if. A quick reminder, an else statement is optional. So you can check if something's true and not do anything if it's false. But more than likely or not, you will have a situation where you'll want to either do something if it's true or something otherwise if it's false as you work through your code in the future. Thanks for watching, folks. If you've got questions, feel free to drop by my office hours on Wednesday. I feel like I gave you a lot of information today, but having this kind of conceptual grounding going into class on Thursday is going to make our lives a lot easier when we actually try to write some interesting programs to do something with this code.